Choice FM is live at 5.
But it's like this, the South got something to say. That's all I got to say.
Reuben Blackwell and Express Yourself on Choice FM.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Choice 92 FM's weekly talk show, Express Yourself. This is Reuben Blackwell, and I'm excited that you're joining me today as you are on your way home from your busy job or your business that you own, and you are locking your doors and jumping in your car, getting ready to get into the 5 o'clock afternoon traffic, or if you're at work already and taking a break and maybe having a little lunch or, just need a little fresh air. I hope that you are listening to us and willing to engage with us as we talk about issues and subjects relative to everyone's health and well-being, but focus specifically on the Black community. And as always, what I like to do is sort of open up with some general information, sometimes good, sometimes challenging, but always relevant. We want to say congratulations to NC State University for achieving history. First time in history that the women and the men have gone all the way through the NCAA championships in basketball to reach the Final Four. Congratulations to Coaches Moore and Coach Keats for their fine showing in the stats. I'm a Tar Heel, but that's all right. I'm pulling from North Carolina. Thank you for everybody joining in to give those two guys and the teammates, their students, a great round of applause. We're excited for you, and congratulations also to the women, the Iowa Hawkeyes, Caitlin Clark. Wow, she set it off last night, didn't she? Somebody said she was possessed, and I saw several of those three-pointers from everywhere on the court. And a huge hug to Angel Reese with LSU Lady Tigers. You're ferocious, Angel, and we are always in your corner. We're always pulling for you. So keep up the good work, and it's all right. Your path has already been charted. You're already history, young lady. Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose, but winners never change who they are. They just get better. So thank you for basketball fans. I know this is a great time of the year that you look forward to, and great exciting things going to be taking place later this week. Okay, so now we're going to shift back to something that is near and dear to my heart, and that is the town of Rocky Mount, the city of Rocky Mount. We have had great challenges and great victories over the last many years, and tonight is our very special guest. We have with us Councilman Andre Knight, the legend, the man, the one who is fearless in his fights and advocacy for the people of Rocky Mount. And we just want to say welcome, Councilman Knight, to Express Yourself. Thank you for joining me tonight. We just want to appreciate you. Thank you for being here.
Sure, my pleasure.
Good to see you tonight.
Thank you.
This night, you got a footprint of service, a footprint of leadership, as well as a footprint of fearlessness and courage. I think the name Andre Knight in Rocky Mount and across the state of North Carolina is synonymous with the fight in you. So that being said, you've been you're a tenured member of the Rocky Mount City Council. You've had a number of challenges, all of which you have met in the election booths. And every time you have had opposition, you face the opposition, but you always come out on top. What inspired you to take up this service, this life of service, and this life of leadership, and this life of fight? What has encouraged you? What motivated you from the start? What happened to make Andre Knight move from private citizen to public servant?
Well, when I graduated from North Carolina Central and returned back here in Rocky Mount in 1993, I was inspired to come back to give back to my community a place where I grew up and I lived, and my parents were here, my church, and I always had a passion for senior adults. And so I wanted to come back and give back to my community and help those who helped me be successful when I graduated from North Carolina Central University. So I came back, was working part-time with Edgecombe Nash Mental Health Center at a group home. And then later I got a job part-time again with Edgecombe Community College, working with the adult basic education and GED program. And so I always had a passion in giving back to seniors here in Rocky Mount. And I was inspired to come back because my grandmother at the time was living. I was a sophomore, but she passed away from pancreatic cancer. So I still had a desire to come back because a lot of older people in my church, St. Paul Church of God in Christ, was very inspirational to me. And I wanted to come back and give back to my family and my church and my community. And so I bought a home and opened up a family care home for seniors.
How old were you? How old were you?
Probably 22.
Okay.
Yeah. Straight out of college, BA degree in political science. Stayed in Durham from 87 to beginning of 93, January of 93, and then I moved back here to Rocky Mount. And so I was excited about opening up the family care home, serving seniors. And then it was going so well, I wanted to expand. And I was doing research on adult daycare centers. And so I had visited adult daycare centers all across North Carolina, from the mountains to the coast, and I wanted to model a adult daycare center, which was the Charles House in Chapel Hill. And I wanted to bring a concept like that here to Rocky Mount. At that time, we only had one adult day health center, and that was the Wright Center. But the one that I wanted to pretty much focus on, it was more of a social model without the health component. And so God blessed me to buy this historic home in Falls Road, the old Henry Gregory. People call it a mansion, but it was a large home on Falls Road. And so once I bought the home, I had some challenges through the city of Rocky Mount, zoning and inspection, and the neighbors. And during that time, most of the neighbors, they call them the blue bloods that lived on Falls Road, they either grew up there or their parents. And so they really couldn't accept the fact that a young African-American male was able to attain a home of that size. The house was sold for $225,000 back in 93. No, excuse me, back in 98, June of 98. And so I was able to get that. And that's when opposition started. Started having a problem with the city. That's when I met you a few years later. And so we were protesting and just coming to city council and expressing ourselves, letting our voice be heard. And so that's where my advocacy came. And then I started going to the NAACP meeting over at North End Missionary Baptist Church. The president was Dr. Albert Lee during that time. And then I met some wonderful people, Lewis Turner, Camilla's Dancy, and some others there going on there.
Maddie Hinton.
Maddie Hinton, yeah. I can't forget about Maddie Hinton.
Yeah.
And so that's where it began. And so at that time, you were not on the council. It was Lamont Wiggins and Helen Gay and Donna Ray Armstrong, Mr. Armstrong. And so shortly after that, Mr. Armstrong, Donna Ray Armstrong, got sick. I think he had a stroke. and then he passed away, and then that's when you threw your hat in to be appointed for that seat. I remember you had probably about 5 or 6 people who was vying for that seat, and you was chosen to fill out, to carry out the rest of his term. And then that's when you were working with Willie Powell, Mr. Powell at OIC. You hadn't become the director at that time. And so I don't think so. Were you the director at that time?
No, I was President Chief Operating Officer. Mr. Powell was my CEO. He was my boss. And
okay.
Yeah.
And so that's where it began. And my predecessor was Helen Gay. I remember Miss Gay when she was running for office. She was campaigning. She came by St. Paul Church of God in Christ, my home church. And that's when I first really met Miss Gay. And then when I returned home, that's when I really got to know Miss Gay. And so once I found out that Miss Gay was going to retire, I said, you know what? I think I want to serve in that seat. And so that's when I started conferring with her and others. And I threw my hat in the ring, and the rest is history. I've been there 21 on 22 years.
22 years later. Yeah. Did you ever expect that it would have so many twists and turns and challenges and, sometimes just out and out, I won't say street fights, but nothing has come easy, has it? No,
and I never could imagine to be serving this long and to have been involved in so many things relating to Rocky Mount and the quality of life for our people and for our communities that we serve. And so it's really been a learning experience. It's been challenged. We have had a lot of challenges that God brought us through, and people who believed in us and still do helped us be able to have so many victories through the struggle, through protests, through disobedience. So we're here now. And so when I look back over my tenure and you look back over yours, we can point out to a lot of things that were not, but they are now. When I first got there, when you look at the department heads, we only had 2 at that time. That was Charles Penny. He was the assistant city manager. And then we had Loretta Braswell with human relations. And then the other person that comes to mind, it was Delton Farmer. He wasn't a department head, but he was in purchasing. And so from 2003, when we became a majority city council, one of the platforms that we ran on was diversified City Hall, to have City Hall to mirror the population in which it served. And so during that time, I think we was, 60% African American?
Mm-hmm. 55, actually about 55%. That's what the official census said. We had a feeling that there were more, but the official number said 55%. And that's when we redesigned, with the help of the Justice Department, the makeup of the wards.
Right. And so now it's almost 70%?
Almost 70%. In 20 years, it's moved, the needle has moved to where Rocky Mount is really probably, when you look at major cities in North Carolina, we're like number 15 or something like that. Right. We're probably the blackest city as far as population, total population is concerned. And a lot has happened. A lot has happened. Let's go back. People don't understand or don't always know or appreciate the history that you carry and the knowledge that you have about the history of Rocky Mount. But you're from Rocky Mount. Your roots run deep in Rocky Mount, and your family history is a wonderful blend of the history of Rocky Mount. You want to give a little insight into where your people come from, and just something that would help people understand another dimension of who this enigma is that sits in our midst.
Yeah, I won't go back too far, but my parents, my grandparents started there, born in the 1920s. But my mother and her mother, they grew up on Pennsylvania Avenue, which is in 516 Pennsylvania Avenue, which is a block from the Booker T. Washington High School. And so I've heard the stories of Douglas Block, Dr. Burnett, Dr. Bullock, the history of Atlantic Avenue. You had most of the school teachers, doctors, lawyers that lived on Atlantic Avenue, Pennsylvania, and Myrtle. It was a blended community where you had from professional to just blue collar workers. And my father, my grandmother's from Battleboro, but they moved to Rocky Mount, and my father grew up on Happy Hill, which is nothing like the hill. And so that's a great history there. The community that was built around tobacco warehouses, tobacco factories. And so I remember my grandmother working in those factories, and my father also worked in those tobacco factories. One was China America, which now ORC owns. I remember he would leave Philip Fibers, and he would come home, and then he would go to work at China America. And I could see my mother driving up down, where the smokestack, it was the dock that was where the trucks would dock and load the tobacco and unload the tobacco. He would come out and get his food and go back. And so he also worked at WB Lee, which was on Atlantic and what is that? Grace, where that intersect. And so I remember those, and my mother worked at those factories too. On my mother's side, come from a family of great cooks. Stories of my great grandmother would, cook potato jacks and whatever else, and they would go sell them at the factories. But when my great grandmother worked for Bob Melton, and I believe that's where they bought their first house. She and her husband, Mr. Tillery, at 516 Pennsylvania Avenue. I think my grandmother was did some of the cleaning in his home, and her husband was working, with the pit barbecue. And so, so that's where my grandmother and mother grew up. And so it's been a great experience to see where we come from and where we are now. That's why I'm so passionate about the older neighborhoods and preserving those. I grew up in South Rocky Mount, which is a community that grew up around the railroad, where most of the people came from South Carolina to help build the railroad. And when you look at South Rocky Mount, it had a great history. It had the Coastline Hospital, ACL, Coastline Hospital. They had, was a bank on Church Street, and a lot of businesses. And so those families, they settled here in South Rocky Mount, and a lot of them lived in those box cars. I remember Miss Deloach telling me that they would put two box cars together, and the families would live in the box car, and they would, build a porch, and they had a place for a kitchen. And so they sort of lived up high, with the railroad. Mr. Raymond Gant, his family lived there. You had some other families. And so those families, once they left living in those boxcars, they built houses on Home, Union Street, Cedar Street, Church Street. And so that's where you got a community of strong people, of a workforce. And so that's what I remember, and that's where the Foster Memorial Church, Reverend Foster, T.V. Foster, that was one of the greatest preachers of his area here in Rocky Mount. And so my roots are all over Rocky Mount. And so that's why it's so important to know your history. So when you get into a position where you're able to help those communities who have not had the opportunity of funding and allocations of funding to improve infrastructure like roads, streets, sidewalks, water and sewer, housing. That's why I receive joy from that when you're able to go back and help those that are still in those communities, their families that remain in those communities. And for those who left and came back and still in those communities, that we're able to create policies and fundings to improve those communities. And so as we had the blockbustering and the white flight, most of Edgecombe County now is predominantly African American within the city limit. And we know that the last, I would say 40, 50 years, that the, power structure had shifted to Nash County, and the funding, when we look at over the years, how the priorities were the priorities of the cities. They were not in these older neighborhoods. When I say older neighborhoods, which is Crosstown, Little Raleigh, South Rocky Mount, around the Y, even though during the urban renewal, around the Y was really a part of it. Around the Y, some of it was where Blacks live, but where True Tabernacle is now on Arlington Street, like the 900 block, going back towards downtown, there was a predominantly white community. They were
railroad workers, weren't they?
Yeah, railroad workers. That's right.
And all the way back to Cokie Road, that area.
Cokie Road. You had, and where Cokie Road, you had the Gorham family that had the, the feed and peanut oil, whatever you call it. The Planters Oil Mill. And so those communities, and then you had another section called the oil mill section. My parents lived in that area for a while too, but those were the commerce in those areas that helped build Rocky Mount wealth and infrastructure.
I'd like for us to take a quick break and then come back. This is Reuben Blackwell with Express Yourself. I'm interviewing Andre Knight, the Rocky Mount legend who has made waves all across the state of North Carolina, the board chair of OIC as well. Don't change that dial, and we'll be right back with you with more of Express Yourself with Reuben Blackwell.
Choice FM is live at 5.
But it's like this, the South got something to say. That's all I got to say.
Reuben Blackwell and Express Yourself on Choice FM.
We're back with more of Express Yourself with Andre Knight. Can I just sort of shift a little bit? Because the history is so rich, isn't it? And it's real. History is real. It's not something that, you read in a book or something that, you heard somebody say. It's the culmination of real people's lives. And when you look at the move of cities and towns all across America, and especially in the South, and especially in North Carolina, you see neighborhoods like this that were once populated with people who were working every day. You know, they were doing the best they could. They were raising families. They were renting until they could own their homes. And then when they owned their homes, they tried to send their children to school and make a living here. Many of them encouraged their kids to move away, you know, so that they would find opportunities. But now we see this great influx beginning to happen, this migration back to the South. Rocky Mount supposedly has lost population, you know, in the last several years. I'm not sure how much I can believe that, but it is what it is. The census has been taken and the numbers say what it is. But now we find these neighborhoods in our city, as in many other cities, you know, all across North Carolina, that have this dynamic of spaces where Black people lived and owned properties. And now the big G word is coming in, gentrification, you know, which at times past might have meant something good taking place, but for Black people, and especially poor people, that has not been a positive thing, has it? So where do we find ourselves now in the challenge of bringing life into these spaces and these places?
Well, I think that pretty much the lot is cast upon us to make sure that gentrification doesn't happen in those areas and to protect those areas, but yet encourage economic development. But for those who have labored and worked in those communities and lived in those communities, have an opportunity to be a part of the revitalization of those communities and those neighborhoods. Take, for example, we had a snippet of the comprehensive plan, and the gentleman was talking about Raleigh and how I think he was the planning director involved in planning, and how the word gentrification came up. And he said, yes, it's gentrified, but as elected officials, we should have policies in place, or have, when we're doing a comprehensive plan, to protect those areas, or encourage those that are still there to become a part of the revitalization. Instead of displacing the people, I think we need to empower them, where it's through cities owning the land of air properties, and then giving those who are there the opportunity to develop that property and to live there, who want to remain in those communities. Even when you go to your community meeting, Happy Hills, you have a lot of people who are still, who grew up in that neighborhood, now living in their parents' house or the grandparents' house. They want to see better communities, safer communities. And so I think those opportunities should go to those that decided to stay here. For those who are coming back, we talk about the Great Migration. When I talk to people my mother's age, my mother's 84, and my father was soon have been in his 90s. During that time, there wasn't no encouragement for them to leave. What people said, if I get through high school, as soon as I graduate, I'm not working in no fields, I'm not working in no factories, and I'm not cleaning up nobody's house. I'm going straight to Baltimore, New York, DC,
Philadelphia,
up north for better opportunities. And so once those people who moved away for better opportunities, now they are retired, graying, they want to come back to their hometown, and they have, a better pension. They have more money. They can come and buy a house for $100,000 or $200,000 and still have money in the bank. So due to better opportunity and better jobs in those larger cities. So when we talk about what we do as elected officials, Rocky Mount is unique, even with the revitalization of downtown. We were able to encourage those who look like us and other minorities to invest in downtown and invest in these neighborhoods while you have opportunities. And so that's why we created programs and funding as seed money to help those who have small businesses, or for those who might not have the credit score to go to the bank to get a small business loan. We created, these were buildings that were left. They was in very deteriorated state. The roof gone, plumbing shot, floors are gone.
Buildings built in the 1890s, early 1900s.
Late 1890s, early 1900s. They were just left decaying. And so you have people who had a vision. Even when the white flight, for those who stayed, you had the mom and pop businesses. You had the beauties in the barber shops, the floor shops, the clothes doctors. You had
even small churches,
churches who really helped hold it together, along with those large banks that were still in our downtown. And so,
and don't forget Soul 92 at that time.
That's right.
South they held their own, holding down Rocky Mount.
They were able, South Star, they were able to hold on to those buildings. And so when we had started talking about the revitalization of downtown, we knew by going to other towns and cities, we knew what the challenges are and were. And so we began to mirror some of the things that they were doing, and some of the stuff created finances in ways that we work with our staff, as far as roof grants, the DBAP, the facade. So we were able to do those things to help people to be able to live out their dreams and to promote their business in downtown. And we still had key stakeholders, as far as the train station that runs right through downtown. The library, we put the money in the Imperial Center. We city renovated the Black Business District, which was the Douglas Block. And then we had the vision of, along with Charles Penny, of the event center. And if we had not been targeted or railroaded, we would have had a 5-star hotel, parking deck. We would have
renovated an entire renovated block. We had an investor ready to put in $60 million of his own money into housing, shops downtown. He was interested in helping folks find ways to own properties, not just lease it from him. Mm-hmm. It was very exciting. And then that's when all heaven had to rise to our support to fight the state auditor and the treasurer and the powers that be to hold us back. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, let's sort of, I want to step back in time because this is so compelling to hear, the story of how we got to where we are today. Let's talk about the influence of Helen Gay in Rocky Mount. What kind of bridge did Helen Gay build?
Helen Gay was a phenomenal woman. She was a woman of creativity, businesswoman, civil rights. She was a negotiator, Christian woman. And so, at one point of time, Ms. Gay had a position where she would help African Americans get jobs with employment security. wasn't that much to choose from, but still she was in a place where she could guide and direct those who were looking for employment to go to these jobs, whether it was domestic, manufacturing, or whatever it may be. She was in that position. And then when she ran for city council, she brought a lot to the table because she knew the community. She grew up there on Cemetery Hill, and she went to Booker T. Washington High School. Her family was known, and then she was very involved with the Presbyterian Church. And then she also had her catering business, and she worked for white business owners, catering. And so she was just, she knew how to put things together. And Miss Gay, if she would put on a program or do a catering, she wanted it exactly right. She wanted her china, her silver, and her everything laid out.
She didn't have her silver, she had her gold. She had
her gold. And she had her crystal. And I remember her telling me with that house, Ingrid Gray, she said, if you had met me a long time ago here at this house, I could have made you a millionaire. But she catered quite a few events at the old Ingrid Gregory house. So Miss Gay, even though they didn't have the majority, when I say they, first it was Reverend Dudley of Mount Zion First Baptist. And then after Mr. Dudley, I think it was Donna Ray Armstrong or Leonard Wiggins. And then Miss Gay came on. She was the first African-American female. And she was, she served us with grace and she was a graceful woman, and she represented us well. And so I think she was able, even though they didn't have a majority, they were still able to negotiate some things that we probably would not have been able to get. And so that's why, when it was time to draw the wards, she said that Ward 1 must continue, must be the ward that had the larger percentage of African Americans in that ward. And you worked closely with her before I got there. And so she would make sure she done her homework. She knew the subject area. She knew the agenda. And so, she was smart. And then
she was always prepared. She was always prepared.
That's right. And so I think you come from a community and come from the background such as Ms. Gay that know the plight of Black folks by her serving in different capacity in the church, the employment security. She knew the challenge of jobs, even with OIC, when it comes to job creation, workforce training. She was doing it back then.
And she was a long-serving board chair of OIC. So you're sort of following in her footsteps in many ways, aren't you?
Trying to. And when you look at a lot of the older people that are no longer with us, we still have Mr. Sam Gray. And, when you look at leaders in Rocky Mount who served politically, most of those leaders had some kind of relationship with the OIC. J.B. Herron, Sam Gray, Helen Gay, Mr. Notre, Penny Boone, Ms. Tillman. So when you look at, so it's a close relationship.
Yes.
So going through the civil rights movement, OIC was a place of training where we probably couldn't get into some of these community college where you might not feel accepted, wanted, or welcome. OIC have always created an environment, number one, to feel safe, one, to feel was you working with staff that understood you, and you wouldn't be embarrassed if you go in there and couldn't read on the level that you supposed to have been reading on. It was a place where you felt comfortable going, getting help, as some would be reluctant to go to other places where folks don't look like us. And so OIC have always been a training, back then it's an institute, but a training ground for people, and also for employment, to help advance, especially African American, during that time, color people, and for anybody that came through the doors, and so I don't know if anybody in Rocky Mount, if they don't know anything about OIC, don't know anything about Jesus, the Lord. That's how close it is, or the NAACP. And so that's how important OIC, I hear dancing say OIC is Rocky Mount. And that's why it was so, I think it wasn't by mishap that OIC was located in the historic Booker T. Washington High School, but it was placed there to carry on the legacy of all the graduates and the teachers and the training and the education that people gained from dear old Booker T. Washington High School. And OIC continued to carry on their legacy. Professor Pope, which was the first principal of Booker T. Washington High School. You got, Dr. Armstrong. So you had Miss Anna Easter Brown, who was the history teacher, the guidance teacher, Miss Tweedy.
And founder of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, one of the original. Right. Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. Right.
I remember this young lady, Miss Phyllis Tillery, which was Willie Powell's niece, that when she was in New York, she was a part of the Negro Council of Women?
Mm-hmm. National Negro Council of
Women. Yeah. With Dorothy Heights, and Dorothy Heights knew
National Council of Negro Women.
For women. She knew Miss Tweedy, and so she wrote something in French to her to send back a message. So we had
they were sorority sisters, by the way. That's right.
That's right.
It's how you had
people, leaders, educators that live in our communities, and that's what it's really about. It takes a village to raise a child. Now we all over the spectrum, and sometimes you don't even know your neighbors, or you living in a community that don't want you there, they don't speak to you, opposed to being in a place where you can impact and you can, have a lasting impression on some young person who may have lost their way. And so, it's OIC. I mean, the only thing it can do is succeed because it's in good soil, the soil that was birthed out of civil rights, out of struggle, out of pain and the blood of our people. And it became a place of higher learning for people all over this country. And so when you are placed in a building, in a site like that, then your roots are planted in good soil. You're planted in fertile soil. And so I'm glad that OIC is there so it can continue the legacy. One thing I really hate that the O.R. Pope School was closed, which was the beacon of hope in that community. And so it's so many things that we have done. I said we because as a team, we were start naming things after African American leaders. Also, Unity Cemetery, which is dear to all of our heart. Some people don't understand, well, why would you want to put money into that old abandoned cemetery? Because we know it's our people who fought for us
Right,
to
right.
be where we are that are in the cemetery. And
Well, can I say this too? You know, one of the battles that I think that we faced over the last, especially the early times of our administration, was that, you know, when things were that were aged and they were owned by white people or in predominantly white communities, those structures, those neighborhoods, the concept of nostalgia was applied because they said it was history. When you look at structures in predominantly black neighborhoods or populated by black people, those things were just old.
Mm-hmm.
And the concept of historic preservation only applied to buildings or neighborhoods where white people owned. But when it concerned property, land, buildings related to black people, they were just old structures that needed to be demolished. Talk about Harper School for a minute. Talk about Harper School.
I passed by it today, and there's a house being built there. But Miss Ellis that lived across the street from
Miss Ruby Ellis.
Ruby Ellis really wanted us to preserve the Harper School. And at that time, I heard about Harper School, but I really didn't know that it preceded Lincoln School.
Mm.
And that's why it was so dear to her. And I rode past there today, and I was going to tell you, we need to place a marker there. But that was one of the first schools that colored folks, black folks went to. And then that's when they built Lincoln School, Abraham Lincoln School on the corner of Grace and Thomas Street. And so that's why, you know,
where OIC Happy Hill is located.
OIC, that's right. OIC right there on Grace Street. And when she came, Miss Ellis came to us, that school, I think it was Bishop Johnson, there was a church, and they had moved out, but the structure was already in a dilapidated state. And, you know, not knowing, you know, all the history that it had, I mean, we could have put some emphasis on it and pushed the staff more to look at precedent than.
I remember we tried, sir. You know,
I don't know if we had a majority then, did we?
No, we had a majority, but we didn't have a majority that was willing to fight on every stand. Mm-hmm. We were coming to grips with understanding our economy. We were coming to grips with understanding the challenge of utilities and Duke Power and electricities, and we were.
We had a lot of things.
We had a lot coming at us, and I remember Miss Ellis was really adamant, and you and I got behind her. But when we started working with the staff only saw an old building that the roof was caving in, and they said when the roof is gone, that you can't save anything on the inside. And really, there were no attempts made by the staff. They talked, they looked, they worked, but they weren't willing to fight. And I think that's where the power of Andre Knight, the power of a leader who had inspiration and vision, I think that's part of the making of who you are. I want to go into shift about present day before our time is up today. But first, I'd like for us to take a quick break, if that's okay with you, so we can pay some advertisers, pay our bills, and then come back. This is Reuben Blackwell with Express Yourself. I'm interviewing Andre Knight, the Rocky Mount legend who has made waves all across the state of North Carolina, the board chair of OIC as well. So I want you to stay tuned to us. Don't change that dial. Just give us a few minutes and we'll be right back with you with more of Express Yourself with Reuben Blackwell.
Choice FM is live at 5.
But it's like this, the South got something to say. That's all I got to say.
Reuben Blackwell and Express Yourself on Choice FM.
Thanks so much for holding that place. We're back with Andre Knight, with more of Express Yourself. And Andre, for the few minutes that we have left, let's talk about the future. You know, you painted a really beautiful picture of the past and some of the challenges that we've had walking through the city of Rocky Mount, and how you've really been a champion, and I've been pleased to be able to work alongside you and see how our city has grown and developed, and we've won some battles. We're still fighting other battles. What's ahead for us in the future? You know, North Carolina is growing crazy. And in fact, this crazy growth, we're about 45 minutes away from Raleigh, the metropolis of North Carolina, which we're happy to be able, because of Choice FM, happy to be able to talk to the residents and the folks who live and do work and play in Raleigh. So what are our challenges now as a small city, 45 east of the fourth fastest growing metropolis in the nation? What are our challenges, and what do you think we need to do to face the growth and to create a space and a place where this beautiful history is not erased or revised or just sort of watered down? What do we do?
I think we're going to have to bridge this gap with young and new leadership. When we became a majority in 2003, it was so prevalent to us that even Ray Charles or Stevie Wonder could see it. So when you can see it, it's not hard to fight it and advocate for it. Just like if you see somebody homeless, you know they don't have a home, but if you see somebody in a house and they may not have the income, you're thinking that everything is fine. So when you get people that don't know the history of 20 years of being in the majority and the things that we as a team, as a council, working across the aisle with our white council members, because at some degree, at some point, they understood too, because of the history of America and the history of how Black people have been treated, especially in government. So they could identify somewhat. But when you get people that cannot identify with the history and realize where we come from as a people, you know, it's not a 50-yard dash, 20 years, it's a marathon. Because when you look at sidewalks, dirt streets are paved, water and sewer in these areas, highways and new housing, that's where it is as far as in policy and funding. And when you try to say that everything is equal or is colorblind, we're really living in an illusion and a false reality. Because when you drive around Rocky Mount, you can see it. We understand it, but everybody needs to understand it. When we see that the Booker T. Washington High School don't have the gymnasium where Dr. King spoke, and now we use that as one of our premier things to promote, but then you walk in the gymnasium and you can't even use the bathroom. That says a lot to us. And so when we are setting policy, doing a comprehensive plan, doing the master recreation plan, we can't forget those communities who have not been at the table. And it takes more than 20 years. It takes more than 40 years. When you look at economic development, you know, Rocky Mount Edgecombe CDC, you know, the vision of George Dickens, who bought all that land. But you got the land, but then you got to get the business there. But if you continue to be redlined or having problems getting funding from banks and its financial institutions, there's still a problem. Or, you know, you remember the time you had to advocate to get the streets cut in from DOT, water and sewer. Those are the kind of things that promote growth. And so I think our challenges are people try to minimize or try to, what's the word? Try to make it seem that the things that we have done and the things that we're saying is not significant. You playing the race card, or it's not all about race. No, it's about policy. It's about removing barriers. It's about allocating funding. It's about having opportunities for those who cannot get into the mainstream to get things done, that we have things in place or programs in place like MWBE, Minority Women in Business Enterprise, right? And so the city of Rocky Mount have millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars of contract when you got less than 1.2% or 1.4% of dollars going to minority women and people of color. That's a problem.
In a city that's almost 70% African American.
Right.
Want you to understand, that's the dilemma.
And then when you have somebody come and try to dismantle your school system and you don't have an outcry from the people, the masses of the people,
right?
That's a problem.
That's a problem.
So that's a problem. So we have to stay awoke, continue to stay on the wall, continue to build, continue to fight, negotiate, whatever it takes to keep us at the table, to keep our issues relevant, and create policies that would keep us relevant. What did you say? Parity, equity, prosperity for all.
That's right.
We can add some more justice. I mean, so when you look at those things, reparations, which we try to put in policies.
That's right.
You look at generational wealth in Rocky Mount. People that don't look like benefited from that wealth that has been passed down, and opportunities for those whose parents didn't have the generational wealth, but they had people in place that could open the doors for people to walk in, to get loans, houses and stuff. So you still had a privilege that a lot of us did not have and still don't have. Mm-hmm. And so as leaders, and as we have a budget now, 240 million, 44 million. Now I think we're able to add 2.4 million to that. So we have almost $250 million. We need to bring something back to these communities and to these families who have labored and built this community and who has made this community sustainable. And we must teach those through the walls of OIC and other places and institutions where they won't get this information, how important it is when we move on, that they continue to advocate and build a community where we will be relevant and respected and appreciated, and that we can live prosperous. And so that's the challenge that we have to remain, or to let others know that we got to carry on this work. And I think if we don't find those who that understand, then we're going to be lost. We're going to see how other cities are. Mr. Charles Robinson done a powerful documentary, and I think he sent it to you, about Black-owned business.
Yes.
Rocky Mount. At one point, Black people just owned what was in Douglas Block. Now you must own about 60% of downtown where you could not shop.
Right.
So we must be able to keep those businesses open and keep those businesses where they will continue to grow. And sometimes, things work and sometimes they don't. But I think we, in a place where we set policies, and we set policy to help not create barriers. to force people out. And so when I look at Rocky Mount, they're talking about Rocky Mount is the most miserable, unsafe. I look at it in a different lens. It depends on who's writing the story, because we can write a story that would trump all what they writing.
Right. And the other side is, what are they trying to get people to do? It's interesting that all of these articles that come out about misery and safety have a lens of white supremacy. And so quickly we're able to run, where we so quickly, Black people so quickly try to verify what other people's story about us is. And that's why, Mr. Knight, we're here talking with you this evening. I really appreciate the time that you've set aside to...
Well, I want to set the record straight for a minute.
Yeah, set it straight.
You're the legendary, not me.
No, I'm the highest.
You're the Mr. Rocky Mount. I want to make sure I say that. You're our senior council person, the longest sitting council member, Reuben. You're probably one of the longest with your tenure, with your 23 years pushing. So I don't know if any other council member have served more than 23 years. If so, the mayor Turnage, as the mayor, he did. Yeah. So all I can say is hope God is continue to give you strength and power to be able to. One thing about you are a negotiator. You are moving certain being used that I don't typically move through. But when you look at everybody, we got something to bring to the table that makes it work. And so you continue to do you, and I do me, and the rest of them do themselves. But we got to all remember what the goal is and what we're trying to do. And if we do that before, it's not about ego or personality. It's about the people. It's about the community that we serve. As long as we can do that and help, that song said, if I can help somebody, I'm fine. If I can help somebody along the way, living will not be in vain. And I just appreciate all that you do, not just as an elected official, but as a powerhouse CEO of one of the largest nonprofit organizations in Rocky Mount. Right now, you somewhere trying to negotiate something. And so it takes skill and knowledge, and it takes the power of God to empower you, to give you the words to say, to be able to make things work, and to be able to bring resources back. Moses said, I can't go, I can't speak. But then he said, Aaron, but you don't have that problem that Moses had. So again, we appreciate all that you do, and continue to strive and just do what God has commanded you to do.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
You talk this long. You're the one that talk.
So now we see who's a real talker. I've been saying this.
No, I'm just doing this to make sure I help you.
Well, we appreciate your time.
I do it in spurts. So anyway.
Well, we appreciate your time. We thank you for your service. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your courage. And thank you, listeners, for being attentive tonight. I know that you were riveted in your seats, whether it was behind the steering wheel.
I thought I would never see in my lifetime that the event center being built in the Edgecombe side of Rocky Mount, the Confederate statue come down, and it was one more. Hopefully we can get a hotel and parking deck and housing bond for our people. And so I think those are some of the main things that we have asked for to help our people. But I thought that, some of the things that we told that we could not do, that was impossible, like the Planters Oil Mill and those other things, environmental injustice that was in our community. So again, I just wanted to make sure I throw that out because that was very challenging, and then too, that was very powerful to see that in our lifetime, something that had been there 70 to 100 years that represented evil in the history of America, that was able to be removed. And so I just want to make sure and the mural that your son was able to, end racism, even though we still got a long ways to go. But anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just want to make sure I threw that in. And thank you, God.
Thank you so much. Don't mind being cut off. Again, this is Reuben Blackwell with Express Yourself with Choice FM, the People Station. Have had an excellent conversation tonight with Andre Knight, Rocky Mount City Council person, civil rights advocate, leader, and board chair of OIC of Rocky Mount. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and ask that you tune back in next Wednesday at 5 p.m. for more of Choice FM's Express Yourself with Reuben Blackwell. Thank you, Mr. Knight. God bless.
Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. God bless.
Choice FM is live at 5.
But it's like this, the South got something to say. That's all I got to say.
Reuben Blackwell and Express Yourself on Choice FM.